Right, so there's been a lot of talk recently about where the FA Cup semifinals should be played, and this gives me an opportunity to talk about something that I'm actually quite passionate about, which is stadiums. And you might not know this yet, I might make more videos about it in the future, but I absolutely love stadiums. I have like 8 Minecraft worlds on my phone just dedicated to making stadiums. Whenever I'm on vacation, it's always the stadiums that I make sure I want to see. That's where most of my stars come from, is different stadiums that I've visited on vacation. So I absolutely love stadiums, and it also just gives me the opportunity to talk about what's going on in the world of football. Because Manchester City played Nottingham Forest in the semifinals of the FA Cup, and whilst the Forest end was pretty full, it was noticeably empty on the Manchester City side. And there's been conversations about Wembley fatigue, which is really annoying to hear about because it's just like we've been to Wembley so much, it's just we don't even care anymore, we've been there too much. Like, shut up, man. Um, I get that's just me being annoyed that Man City's been really successful, but I can't help but feel a bit annoyed that they've been to Wembley so much that their fans might actually just have some apathy towards it. Of course, there's also ticket price considerations to take in, and whether or not Wembley fatigue is a real thing or if that's just the BBC talking about something they can make an article about. There's considerations there, but what was very clear was there were a lot of empty seats on Manchester City's side, which means that something might need to change. And the first thing is ticket prices. They were very expensive for the game, and once again, football fans being priced out, you probably would have more seats full if the tickets weren't quite as expensive. But the other consideration is potentially having a cup final or a cup semifinal, I mean, in the north or in the Midlands, not all of them in London for Wembley Stadium. And this used to be how things were played, where the semifinals would be played at a neutral venue across the country. I think Wembley didn't host a semifinal until like the 90s, and then it was semi-sporadic until like 2007, I think it was, when the new Wembley was complete. And then the FA said they'd paid so much money to make Wembley that they had to host semifinals to pay off some of that, which is a bit lame, but fair enough. Wembley is an absolute beautiful stadium, so maybe it's worth semifinals there. That's me as a stadium lover again, but it then means a lot of northern cities don't get to host major events, and that kind of goes to broader implications of there's already this idea of like the South getting more and more stuff and being the dominant force in Britain, whilst the North and Midlands kind of fall behind. And there's definitely some feelings of animosity towards the South, just like trying to profit and work for themselves whilst potentially leaving the North and Midlands behind and neglecting those areas. And that can be seen in a lot of ways, and football is just one area of that. And perhaps the moves for the semifinals to be played at Wembley as well just show another example of that movement towards the south of England, which is a shame because there's some really nice stadiums up north. If we were to play FA Cup semifinals in stadiums outside of Wembley, there's 4 stadiums I think would be locks to host games, and those are St James's Park, Bramley-Moore Dock Stadium, City of Manchester Stadium, and Villa Park. And you might be a bit surprised to hear me say Bramley-Moore Dock Stadium and City of Manchester Stadium rather than Old Trafford and Anfield, but that's kind of how it's gone with the Euros in 2028, with Everton and Manchester City getting to host games at those Euros instead of Anfield and Old Trafford. And there's some reasons for that. In Old Trafford's case, it's that the stadium is falling apart. And that is something sad because, as much as I don't like to admit it as an Arsenal fan, I actually love Old Trafford as a stadium. Like, going to Old Trafford, it's the only stadium really that I've actually felt intimidated by walking up to it. Like, stadiums are often referred to as fortresses, but I feel like in Old Trafford it really does give off that vibe of just like this massive, intimidating, historic stadium that has its own kind of aura to it. And I'm going to be sad when Old Trafford goes, but it might be something that needs to happen because the stadium is unfortunately falling into disrepair, and it would almost be as expensive to fix it as it would be to just build a new stadium, or at least that's what owners have said. And in the case of Anfield, it also might have some issues like Old Trafford, where the stadium's quite old now, and certainly Bramley-Moore Dock Stadium, which opens. I mean, I think they've played a few games there, but it's going to like officially be the home of Everton next season, and so it's a much more modern ground. And also, I think there's been issues with the size of Anfield's pitch and whether it can meet international standards. And if it can't meet UEFA standards for size, I wonder if they'd have a similar problem with a neutral game organized by the FA. So for those reasons, I'm excluding Old Trafford and Anfield from that list. The other stadiums that could maybe make it are the Stadium of Light, which is actually a lot bigger than one might realize. It almost seats 50,000 people. The downfall with the Stadium of Light is that it's really close to Newcastle, and I think St. James Park would be preferred to the Stadium of Light, and there's probably, I don't think both of them would be considered, and so if they go against each other, it probably would be St. James Park that's chosen to host major events. And also, you've got Elland Road and oh heck, I was thinking of one other one. Elland Road and Hillsborough were the other ones that I thought could maybe host events, but those ones might be just too small to host games. And actually, both of them might have similar issues to Old Trafford and Anfield in terms of age. So there are some stadiums in the North and the Midlands that could host events. The question is whether they should, and I'm kind of split on this, because on the one hand, I think that the FA Cup kind of favors the southern teams as well in the semifinals. Like Crystal Palace had a massive support, which kind of makes sense because they are a London-based team. So of course they're going to have a lot of support in Wembley. Of course, Nottingham Forest and Aston Villa also had a lot of support, but it probably would be an advantage and something that would be enjoyed by fans of teams in the Midlands in the North if they could have an FA Cup semifinal played a little bit closer to home when they reach it. But at the same time, I think that Wembley, unlike pretty much any other stadium, does have this aura to it where it is really special to play a game at Wembley, and it's kind of like something that clubs can look forward to. And most clubs aren't Manchester City. For most clubs, a game at Wembley is absolutely a major event and something that you can look forward to and something that feels really special. You don't get too many games at Wembley, so it's pretty cool for clubs like Aston Villa, Nottingham Forest, and Crystal Palace, who haven't been to too many FA Cup semifinals or League Cup finals, to get to play at Wembley. And that's even more the case for the EFL Trophy and the non-league finals days, like the FA Trophy, not the FA Trophy, yeah, the FA Trophy, sorry, and the FA Vase. This is imagine a 9th tier or 5th tier club getting to play in Wembley. That is really special. And so I am kind of torn because I think that there is something really special to getting to play at Wembley. But at the same time, I think that it's maybe not the most, it would be a lot easier for fans in the North and Midlands to make it to games, and you might see more attendances if it was closer to home, and it would also give those cities a chance to host major events. There's also the issues of locker rooms, which would be more of a problem than you might think for neutral games, because a lot of teams, in fact most of them, will try and engineer a little home advantage into their locker rooms. So they'll have the really nice locker rooms, but then the away locker rooms will be more basic, toned down, and sometimes really gross, or the TVs don't work. I've been on a few stadium tours, and one of the most interesting things is to hear about how the clubs will engineer a home advantage into the away locker rooms to try and make teams uncomfortable. But that doesn't work for a neutral game. In a neutral game, there is some sort of need to have at least serviceable locker rooms for both teams. You can't try and hinder one team when it's a neutral showing. And so all of these stadiums in the North and Midlands that could have some consideration of hosting semifinal games would have to put some kind of work. And it might not need to be too much, and they are hosting neutral games in major tournaments like the upcoming Euros, and the Women's Rugby World Cup's going to be hosted here this summer. So it might be a massive stepping stone, but they would have to do some work on their locker rooms to make sure it's up to standard for a neutral game. One thing I do wonder is it might work better to have the League Cup final somewhere other than Wembley, which might be a bit weird. And certainly living next to Newcastle, I know a lot of like Newcastle fans are really excited about getting to go to Wembley and experience that. So maybe it still does provide that same special feeling. Like I know the Women's League Cup right now doesn't play the final at Wembley. It plays in at different locations across the country, and I'm almost more in favor of that because I think that it tends to be the Big Six who most often go to Wembley anyways in the League Cup final, and I'd say then maybe you could even get better attendances, or maybe not. But I wouldn't be opposed to playing the League Cup final in different stadiums across the country, and I'd maybe be more in favor of that than moving the semifinals. This is a very long video where I probably went a bit too much in on stadiums, but please tell me what you think and whether you think that semifinals should be played at Wembley Stadium or should maybe be moved to different stadiums across the country.